my honor to introduce Taft graduate Marc Thiessen, a leading conservative writer and commentator. He's someone who's devoted his life to policy and politics, was in the Pentagon on 9/11 when it was attacked, and he has sat alone in the Oval Office with President George W. Bush to help him write his State of the Union address. Mr. Thiessen grew up in New York, attended Taft, and graduated from Vassar College and the Naval War College. His articles have appeared in the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. He's a frequent contributor to Fox News, the Kelly File, and CNN. He was named by the Daily Telegraph as one of the 100 most influential conservatives in the country. Mr. Thiessen will be available in the faculty room for anyone interested in talking about politics, policy, or the presidential election next block, and he will be in East Dining Hall, I hope, during D block to continue the discussion. Please join me in welcoming esteemed Taft alum, author, and columnist, Marc Thiessen.
Thank you, Stivey. I appreciate that welcome. Thank you all for having me here today. When I was here, we used to do these events in the evening. So, as a speaker, this is much better because I'm not keeping you from dinner. I'm just keeping you from class. I've come from Washington, D.C., as we like to call it, 46 square miles surrounded by reality. But we're about to have a big historical presidential inauguration. Mr. Mack tells me that you guys are all talked out about the election. I don't blame you. But if you want to ask any questions about the election or politics or what's happening in Washington, D.C., I'm happy to do that. I'm going to be in some classes later today and at the faculty lounge. But Mr. Mack suggested that what I talk to you about today is a little bit about my career in Washington and how Taft prepared me for a life that took me from Watertown to the White House. As Stivey indicated, I've had a fascinating career. I've worked for some of the greatest conservative leaders in our nation, from Jesse Helms and Donald Rumsfeld to Dick Cheney and George W. Bush. I was served in government at the dawn of the War on Terror and saw it up close from the planning rooms of the Pentagon to the Situation Room, the Oval Office, and some of the major battlefronts in the Middle East. As Stivey indicated, I was in the Pentagon on September 11, 2001 when the planes hit. I was blessed to be a few corridors down from the point of impact, but I felt the building shake. I smelled the smoke. My wife Pam was 8 months pregnant with our first child at the time, and all the phone lines in Washington were down, and she didn't know for an entire day whether her still unborn child had a father. But in the months that followed, I traveled about 250,000 miles around the world with Secretary Rumsfeld, visiting 50 countries, including his first visits into Afghanistan after the liberation from the Taliban and his first visit into Iraq after the toppling of Saddam Hussein. I vividly recall landing in Bagram Air Base, which is an old Soviet airfield outside of Kabul, just days after it had been abandoned by the Taliban forces. And the place was littered with the carcasses of old Soviet MiG fighters. And when we landed in the KC-130, we were warned not to step off the tarmac because the entire base was a minefield. And if you've ever been on a military base, you know that you drive through, they have these concrete barriers that form a zigzag pattern. They didn't have any concrete there, so they used old Soviet MiG engines for the barriers. So you've got these $1 million engines that are being used as barriers. And we met with Afghan resistance leaders and planned the rest of the military campaign to drive al-Qaeda from the sanctuary where they had planned the 9/11 attacks. A few years later, I was with Secretary Rumsfeld when he made his first trip into Baghdad after the fall of Saddam Hussein. And we traveled to dozens of countries in the region. Rumsfeld liked to visit 3 or 4 countries in a day sometimes. So we would get on a plane and go from Afghanistan to Kazakhstan to Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. We used to call them the one-night stand tours. But I had a front row seat to history. And in 2004, I moved from the White House to the White House to be a speechwriter for President George W. Bush. I spent 5 years there, eventually became his chief speechwriter, and I was the lead writer on 2 State of the Union addresses, lots of Oval Office addresses. And over time, you will find as you leave Taft and go on to your careers, and you'll have fascinating jobs, every job eventually becomes a job. And even if you're working in amazing places, I worked in the Pentagon and Capitol Hill, and eventually you're just consumed by your responsibilities that you stop to notice the place that you're working in. That never happened in the White House. The sense of wonder I had coming in every day to my office in the West Wing, I kind of had to pinch myself. I often thought as I was sitting there at my desk, a Secret Service agent was going to walk in and say, "Mr. Thiessen, there's been a terrible mistake. Please come with us." One of my proudest experiences at the White House was when President Bush called me into the Oval Office and asked me to craft his speech revealing the existence of the CIA's terrorist interrogation program. It was a program so secret that I had to write it on a top secret computer that wasn't even connected to the classified internet and was housed in a secure facility in the National Security Council. If Hillary Clinton done that, she might be planning her inaugural address right now. But at the time, even the At the time, even the topic of the speech was so classified, I couldn't tell anyone what I was working on, so I'd literally disappear for days to the National Security Council, and my colleagues would say I was at my undisclosed location. But I was given access to all the top secret intelligence that was produced by that program, including the details of what 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had told his interrogators about his plans for follow-on attacks and how they had disrupted them. One day I was asked to go up to the National Security Council and to meet with some CIA officials, and I sat across a table from several men, and I didn't know anything about them except the fact that they were from the CIA. They were briefing me on this program, and they began to describe how the programs worked, the interrogation techniques, why they weren't torture, why they were effective, and the information they had gotten, and the plans that these guys had to carry out a second wave of attacks here in the United States. And as they spoke, it slowly dawned on me that they were not describing things that other people had done. This was the man who was talking to me, who was the man who had waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and gotten him to give up his plans for the next attack. And I got to know him and his colleagues. I got unique insights that most Americans didn't know at the time about the program and what it had done. And after I left the White House, the Obama administration shut down the program, I decided to write my first book detailing what I had known, because President Obama declassified a lot of the details that had been secret. And so I was able to write the first definitive history of that program and how they kept our nation safe. Soon after that, the Washington Post asked me to write a weekly column. I joined the American Enterprise Institute, which is the premier free market think tank in Washington, D.C., and Megyn Kelly asked me to be a regular contributor on her show on Fox News. So the last year I've gotten a chance to travel around the country, go to all the primaries and all the debates, and be part of the debate over the election. So I'm turning 50 in 10 days, and here I am 3 decades after my career at Taft, and I've had amazing experiences. I've traveled to war zones, I've written State of the Union address, I've had the chance to serve my country at a time of great consequence, and today I get to engage in the battle of ideas on Fox News and in the Washington Post. And the reason my point in telling you all this is that as I look back on my career, so many elements of that career began here at Taft. It was here at Taft that I first became fascinated with politics and public policy and the presidency. In 1984, during the presidential election, I was here, and one of our teachers took us to Waterbury to see a Reagan rally. And I got to see Ronald Reagan speak in a campaign rally. It was the first time I'd ever seen a president speak live, and I had no idea at the time that one day I would be writing those speeches. But I had that first experience, and by the way, I was a liberal when I was here, so I had a Mondale sticker on at the time. But that transformation happened later. But it was here at Taft that I got instilled with the idea of serving a cause greater than myself, not to be served but to serve, that motto that is what this school is all about. I decided to have a career in public service and to serve my country through government. It was here at Taft I discovered my love of writing. I took Barclay Johnson's class, Experiments in Writing, and he became a mentor to me and helped me develop the skill that opened so many doors to me during my career. He encouraged me to hone my talents in the classroom, and also he helped me through Taft's Independent Studies program. He helped me find a job during my final senior trimester working as a reporter at the Waterbury Republican American. So instead of going to class in my final trimester, I got on a bus every day and went down to Waterbury and worked as a beat reporter, writing stories and covering news stories and local news. And that developed the skill that would open those doors for me, and I really wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't been for him and his mentorship when I was here at Taft. It was also here at Taft that I first summoned the courage to stand up and speak in front of an audience when I tried out and landed a leading role in the Taft production of Dracula here on the Bingham stage. So this is that experience here at Bingham prepared me for a career that has me now. I now have the opportunity to speak in front of millions of people on Fox News and summon up the courage to speak in front of other people. That started here at Taft. And when I went on to Vassar College, I sort of took a turn to the right and became editor of the conservative student newspaper on campus, the Vassar Spectator. And in the summer of 1988, 4 years after seeing Ronald Reagan here at Taft, when I went down to Waterbury, I got a summer internship working in the Reagan White House as an intern in the White House Office of Public Affairs, and sort of got the inkling maybe I might want to come back to the White House one day and serve in another capacity. As a college student, I also got involved with a great organization called the Young Americas Foundation. They carry on the Reagan legacy by helping high school and college students around the country learn about conservative ideas, and they opened tons of doors for me. They organized national student conferences, which I attended, and they also own the Reagan Ranch in Santa Barbara, which is actually not open to the public. They own it, and they bring students from around the country to Santa Barbara. They fly them out and tour the Reagan Ranch, and it looks literally, it's not a museum, there's no displays or exhibits. It's literally as if the Reagans had just gone out to the grocery store. It's a beautiful facility. And so if you're interested in getting involved in a life of adventure and politics and public service, and you're in the center right, then, or even if you're not, if you just want to learn about other ideas, I encourage you to get involved with them. They'll send you out to Santa Barbara and help you bring speakers here to campus. But finally, there's one other way that Taft prepared me for my career in politics, and that was playing hockey. I was the goalie on the JV team for 3 years, never quite made varsity, but kept trying. But I loved hockey. I loved being in net, and that actually came in very handy for me at one point when I was in the White House. In June 2005, I was the newly minted deputy director of speechwriting. I still hadn't become the chief speechwriter. And I was in the White House Family Theater with President Bush as he was practicing the nationally televised address to the nation on the war in Iraq that he would deliver from Fort Bragg, North Carolina the next night. This was my first time as the lead writer on a nationally televised address to the nation. So this was a big test for me, and it wasn't going well. The president was not happy. The day before in the Oval Office, he'd been happy with the text, but now we'd have these practice sessions in the Family Theater. It's about 44 seats, and they'd put up a teleprompter, and senior staff would come in, just like in the theater here, and he would read the speech and practice it. And first time was more of an edit session where he would stop and start editing, and as he got more comfortable with it, he'd stop editing. And he couldn't get past the first paragraph. He was unhappy. He was decidedly unhappy with the speech that he would have to give in less than 24 hours. And so my job, in fact, my White House career was really on the line. And if you've never been dressed down in public by the President of the United States, it's not a joyful experience. But for some reason, I wasn't flustered. I knew exactly what was causing his unhappiness, the part of the speech I needed how to fix and how to fix it, and so I just needed to execute the changes. So as the President tore into the speech draft and said, this is wrong, that's wrong, fix this, fix that, I took careful notes, so did the other senior staff in the room, and then once that brutal practice session was over, we went back to the West Wing and sat down around a conference table and started going through making sure we were all on the same page. As we were comparing our notes, the Chief of Staff came in to the room and said, can we cancel the speech? Which was not exactly the vote of confidence I was looking at for. And they said, no, you can't cancel the speech. It's already been announced to the press. We have to do it, but we know how to fix it. Don't worry. And so he left the room looking decidedly unconvinced. But we fixed it. After we had all settled on a game plan, I went back to my office with my then boss, Chief Speechwriter Bill McGurn. We ordered some sandwiches from the White House mess and pulled an all-nighter to fix the speech. So when you leave Taft, you will still be pulling all-nighters at some point in your career. We finished about 5 a.m. and sent it to the residents and waited for the president. He usually got into the desk at the Oval Office about 6:45, waited for him to answer. So at 6:45, my phone rings, and the caller ID says, POTUS. I pick up the phone. It says, Mark, it's the president. I took a deep breath. Yes, Mr. President. He said, much better. Exhaled. He gave us a few small changes and then told us to put it in the big print, which was the text that he would use to actually read the speech. So whenever it went in the big print, that meant he was happy. The speech was done. And so we were in the free and clear. And Bill and I traveled to Fort Bragg for the speech, which was very well received, got good plaudits on television. And on the flight back to Washington on Air Force One, the president called us up to his cabin in the front of the plane. And he shook our hands. He said, good job, lads. He said, a little rough getting there, but good job. And we had a laugh. Bill and I went back to the staff cabin and collapsed in our seats, physically and mentally exhausted. And that was when I discovered the secret stash of scotch on Air Force One. And we both had a drink. And after we recovered, Bill said to me, how did you remain so calm? With all that pressure, why weren't you curled up like a ball in the corner? And I thought about it and I said, I was a goalie. After spending so many years in the crease here at Taft, I was completely comfortable with being the last line of defense, where everything depended on me just carrying out my job. When I knew the president wasn't happy with the speech, I didn't think about the fact that my job was on the line, just as I didn't think about what would happen if Hotchkiss scored on a breakaway in the last seconds of a tie game. I just focused on the job at hand. I trusted my skills and my training, my experience, and I did my job. And I survived that experience. I went on to write several State of the Union addresses and to become his chief speechwriter. So by doing the job, I was able to continue my career. And so mental toughness, that playing hockey here prepared me for my career after hockey. Playing hockey taught me habits of success, mental toughness, discipline, teamwork, resilience. Doing drama here at Taft helped me prepare for standing in front of audiences and fighting for my beliefs. Discovering my love of writing here opened so many doors for me to serve my country in times of great consequence and have unimaginable adventures in my life. And I'll just close by saying this, that all of that is ahead of you if you want it. It seems like yesterday that I was just sitting in the seats where you are in today, and I had no idea of the adventures that were in store for me. And each of you has adventures that are in store for you, different than mine to be sure, maybe not in politics, maybe in some other path of life, but just as exciting and just as rewarding. And your lives and careers are going to take you to places that you've never imagined. And years from now, 30 years from now perhaps, you will look back and realize all the ways, large and small, that Taft and your experiences here prepared you. So it's a pleasure to come back here and share some of those experiences with you. Thanks very much for having me, and I'll be happy to answer some questions later in the Speechwriter.